Good morning. I will call the January 11th, 2022 special call meeting to order. If you would, please stand and join me in the invocation and pledge. Father God, we come before you giving thanks for this morning. Thank you for allowing us to come through the bad weather, the rain and the snow this week and this past week. Thank you for all of our city workers who work tirelessly to ensure that we could get to work and move around town. God, we ask you to be with our council today and every day as they make decisions to better the city of Jackson and the people that we serve. I ask these things in your son's name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, council, we'll go to roll calls. And Sandy, see all members present with the exception of Councilman Brooks. Before we get to the agenda items, I told some of you, council, but the brown box over here is, for the council members, there's a calendar for each of you from Pierce Manufacturing. Those are the ones who manufacture our fire trucks. And for the first time ever, City of Jackson Fire Department is highlighted in the month of June in this calendar. So Chief Samuels want to be sure that all council members had a copy of that. It's because of you all that they're highlighted, because of the fire trucks that you all voted to allow the fire department to replace and get new ones. All right, we go to second reading. Item 1, proposed budget amendment, industrial land acquisition, Tall Oaks, amount of $4,896,250.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to second. Any further discussion? Council, please vote.
Motion passed 8-0.
All right. Item 1, new business, consideration of amendment to American Rescue Plan Act, spend planned resolution. Council has gotten a couple of iterations of that amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could speak to that.
Yes.
And so, interesting kind of turn of events immediately after our council meeting on Thursday. The final guidance that we have been waiting for a year, well,
Almost
what is
a year,
that?
10
like
months.
10 months now, was released, which allowed us to do some things and more flexibility in what we're doing here at the city as far as acquiring some of the capital needs that have been listed previously. And so the discussion that we were having on Thursday was revolving around accountability. I felt that somebody needed to be accountable for qualifying these funds. The significance of that has been reduced because of this final guidance, because now we have $10 million that we really don't have to provide those qualifications for anymore. We can take those under lost revenue. And so with that and some of the comments about community input that I've received and that were voiced in the council meeting, I'm offering this amendment to our resolution, and I'll go through it if that's okay, or you can go ahead and ask me questions. I sent a little synopsis in the email, but effectively what this would do was reallocate or redistribute the funds into 3 major buckets. The first is the $10 million would be available for operational or capital support for us to go ahead and buy the things that we've talked about for this year. And then we could budget the remaining funds in the next fiscal year to do the same. So that gives us historically about 2 years of capital needs that we can take care of with this money. The second is allocating $993,000 towards infrastructure grant matching. There is a program that the state and the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation have put forth within the last month or so, where we can submit qualified projects and match. Currently, our co-funding match would be 20%, but we can reduce that if we use these local ARPA dollars to reduce those funds, that matching requirement. So that means we could leverage this almost $1 million into about $10.4 million for infrastructure studies and improvements within our community. We've talked a little bit about having some pilot programs out in Bemis and in East Jackson to look at flooding issues. we would be able to cover that under this program offered by the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. And then the final bucket would be the balance of that, which is $2.9 million, would be available for community support. And those dollars would come from public input. So we could have surveys, town halls, and other ways of reaching out into the community to gather information from them and develop plans that suit the needs of the community moving forward. Those could be anything from affordable housing opportunities to early child care, and a litany of things that the American Rescue Plan lays out for us to really attack. These are the things, the community involvement piece, if you read through the American Rescue Plan, that's the spirit of the document. They want us to use these in our community to help those that were negatively affected by the pandemic, and that this pandemic, we're in another spike right now, is affecting those people again. So these dollars could go towards that. I've heard there's some concern about the timing of spending these dollars. We have just under $7 million available to us right now. We could spend that on those capital needs that we approved previously. The other $7 million we expect to get in May of this year. So we have time to plan for these community support items over the next couple of months. It's important to know that we're going to have to plan for that, but we're also going to have to put some serious planning into the infrastructure grant matching. It's a short timeline, as I've said before. I think here in the next 2 or 3 months, they're going to open it up for us to submit those proposals. But that's not just free money that we get. That is money that we have to submit a project on and have matched through the state. So I'm open to answer any questions that you may have on this, and I'd hope that you'd support this.
Councilman, let me pose a question just to make sure that I understand. So the capital needs that we can immediately take care of are things such as second set of turnout gear for the fire department?
Yes, sir.
And all of those things, anything for the police department?
Yes, sir.
Included in that?
Yes.
So
And,
so what you're telling us then is that the needs of so many departments within the city, we have $10 million to completely clear those up,
yeah,
in simple language?
yes, sir, for this year.
Okay.
Mhm. And the balance of that could be used to do the same thing next year.
Okay, all right, because I really want to make sure, because I know that there's an issue with turnout gear for the fire department, because it is extremely bad for them to have to come right off of a fire with wet gear, hang it up and try to dry it, and then turn right around and put wet gear back on. There's
And just the soot and the carcinogens on there as well.
correct, the carcinogens in that material called Nomex, that's in that, and I'm familiar with Nomex because in my flying days with the military, that's exactly what we wore, were Nomex flight suits. They were fire resistant. So I think we need to take a serious look at what you're proposing and make sure that we get our fire department and police department taken care of for sure, as with other capital needs that we have.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to address what Councilmember Pickens was just saying. With the version of the resolution that we passed at the last general meeting, we are still in a position to deploy those funds to address those needs that you're concerned about, with or without the proposed additional language.
Yes, sir. We would have to submit, per that proposal, we would have to submit that guidance to the federal government. We'd have to submit qualifying projects. So the way we were moving previously was that those projects would have to qualify under the federal guidance. Some of those, as you know, I was questioning us being able to reach that bar on some of those. Now we don't have to do that. So this proposal would relieve us from having to do that.
Mr. Chairman? Okay, I'm understanding, and this is how I felt last week, that when you look at the items that we already have that we want to spend the money on, those are items that normally we would have to spend for the next 2 to 5 years in our capital budget. So with using those funds now, and we have a larger cap that we can increase to, by using those funds now, we have really relieved the strain on the capital budget. So I am looking for the next 2 to 5 years, those funds could be used for projects that we do desperately need in the community. and could be infrastructure, could be the stormwater study. So if we look at only 993,000 for the infrastructure, we're already working on a plan that Mr. Wolf is developing, so we will be getting that matching money, correct? Without this language change?
Yes, I mean,
submit-
yeah, I think so, yeah. Short answer, yes. We had previously budgeted, I think, 1,089,000, give or take. And then we had some items in there, but as I mentioned last week, those are placeholder items for that. So there's still some availability in that line item and that section for those matching dollars.
My main concern is I just want to make sure we get the most for our money. And I don't know if it's proper now to ask Mr. Wolf that, but as long as the stormwater study that we are looking at and wanting to do, as long as we can continue with that, but if these funds are available, instead of just doing the study, let's look at that to implement in the next 2 to 3 years or however we can.
Yeah, I think the
So-
funds are available in this current state for the stormwater area. And then, we will work on that. I sent an email to council yesterday, I believe, for the webinars, to sign up for webinars
Right.
for that TDEC funding. And so there'll be some more educational opportunities this month. And this has all been brought about very quickly from TDEC. And so as we get educated on that, and Mr. Wolf is looking at that, Bobby's looking at that as well on those funding opportunities and how and what we can do to do that.
Mr. Chairman, could Mr. Arnold come up and kind of share with us his knowledge on this TDEC matching grant? I just want the council to be aware of the kind of short timeline. If we were to wait, as Councilwoman Wallace was talking about, for these other funds to come to fund this, we may miss the window of opportunity.
I think she was asking if correct me if I'm wrong, Councilman Wallace, if they were currently, as is already stated, allocated for the stormwater. I think is what
Correct.
she was asking.
Correct.
Okay.
I want to make sure whatever we're changing, that we're doing it only to change because there's some money that we could be missing out on. If not, then that's a different question. So that's what I want to clarify. Are we in the ability right now, do we have the ability right now to go ahead and be able to write grants and get the most money to effectively address our stormwater and infrastructure?
Yes.
I guess that would lead me to the question of, we currently have 3 projects, stormwater projects, in the prior plan, and the balance of the funds, which was approximately $200,000 available for this TDEC matching. And so the way that we could do that would be to not do those stormwater projects and free up those monies to be available for the TDEC.
Yeah.
That, just so we're all on the same page.
Right.
So that would be an amendment to the plan anyway, correct? Or how would we go through that?
Well, that would be we talked about, be the line item presentation to the council. If we were going to do a qualified project for stormwater, we had to present that anyway. And so those were, like I said, those were placeholders in the itemized plan. I know that Mr. Wolf indicated that one of the projects wasn't in need anymore.
Right.
So that's why we had that there, and it would be prior to any spend that we did. And so if we were going to apply for the grant or the matching funds or whatever that looks like, whatever TDEC lays out, we would bring that to council prior to the spend, and it would be a presentation of this is what the itemized items were in the overall plan. This is what we plan to use the fund for. Council, do you approve to do that? That's how that would look. As it is now, right? So,
Mr. Arnold, could you speak, I know you've read through this guidance as I have from TDEC. Could you speak to kind of the rough timeline and the leverage opportunity that we have here?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Before I do that, just as a point of clarification, more reminder, because I think everyone understands this. The resolution on the spend plan, that's a 2-year plan.
That's right.
We actually only have roughly 6.9 million available now, and an additional 6.9 million we're expecting near the end of this fiscal year, the beginning of the next fiscal year. So, yes, So one opportunity for infrastructure exists within the ARPA funds that we've received directly here at the city, as you guys have been discussing, right? That's one of the, infrastructure is one of the categories that we can spend that type of money on. So that's one opportunity. In addition to that, I don't have these numbers in front of me, but the state of Tennessee received well over $1 billion. I can't remember the exact number.
1 billion.
Yeah, a big number. In ARPA funds that went directly to the state. And the state has an advisory committee on ARPA funds that has made recommendations, kind of an oversight committee on different ways that the state should invest that money. And one of the ways is in infrastructure related to stormwater and clean water and broadband. And as someone mentioned earlier, TDEC has put together a program to allocate and invest those funds that the state has received. So in that plan, the city of Jackson has the opportunity to access, in addition to the funds that we received here directly locally, there's an additional, I'm rounding numbers a little bit, but there's an additional $9.3 million that the city has access to potentially. Those funds were allocated to counties and cities based on, there's a base seed allocation for every city and county of a certain amount, then there's a population-based allocation, and then there's an allocation based on the city or county's ability to pay, the ATP index, ability to pay. But in order to access that 9.3 or so million dollars, there is a match, right? The match ranges from as low as no match, I think, up to as high as 40% match, depending on various factors in the community. Our match for the city of Jackson is 20%. So in order to access that $9.3 million, we would have to fund up to 20% of that, which is, I don't know, 1.8 something million dollars or so, in order to access those funds. There are three ways, if I remember correctly, that we can reduce that 20% match down to 10%. So half of that, or 5% of that 10% reduction, can come if we use our local ARPA funds as part of the match to draw down the state funds. I think that's primarily what Councilman Taylor's been talking about. You can reduce it another 5%, a couple of other different ways. One is hopefully the state has identified priority projects or kind of priority initiatives from the state standpoint. Hopefully our projects that we may identify might align with those state identified priorities. If that's the case, you have the opportunity to reduce that match another 5%. And then there's a third way, I can't recall exactly.
Collaborations.
Yeah, collaboration among cities and counties and local utility districts and those type of things. So we can, so there's three boxes we can check. And depending on how many of those three boxes we check, we have the opportunity to reduce that match from 20% down to 10%. And I guess the final question was like the question about the timing of this, and I would agree with what I've read and the webinars I've seen with Councilman Taylor's observation in that now, I wouldn't be surprised if it was any day now. But certainly very early in 2022, in the next month or so, it's anticipated that our TDEC has at least indicated they're going to open up, I guess, the portal or the process where communities can submit projects for their review, right? And that's if a so we'd have to submit the project for their review before we could, and approval before we could draw down any funds. And that's anticipated to happen, that process is anticipated to start very quickly. And then the way that it would work would be if cities or counties or other subrecipients, for whatever reason, do not access and use the potential funds that they've got access to, right? And if there's any state money left over as well, all of that would go into a pool of money that later on this year or early in 2023, I believe, they would take that money and open up like a competitive grant process.
Right, so,
Is
so
that-
the not, yes, sir, I think you described it very well. So that final point, I think, is another important point, that if we don't access these funds here in the next few months, we will go from a non-competitive opportunity to a competitive opportunity. We're competing with other communities for
Potentially,
these
yeah.
funds, potentially. I'd like to, go ahead.
So, Mayor, as you were saying, do we have the money set aside now to 1.9 million?
Well, we have 1,189,000, I think, is what's in the stormwater group.
That we could use if it came up?
Yes.
So it's already available?
Mr. Chairman, with the way things currently stand, we've already approved the spending plan. We have the resolution, the current version without this added language. Is there any reason we would not pursue these TDEC funds with the projects that we've already been focused on, with or without additional language?
No, I think just like I said a moment ago, that even anything that we would do prior to submittal would come before council for approval on that, because we would be using the funds. And so I don't think that doesn't change in your amended resolution. We still bring the projects prior to.
Yeah, so the change in the accountability is, if you flip to the second page there, so under the community support initiative, so where we're asking for public input to drive some of these decisions on the 2.9 million, those projects would come out of that public input session and come to the city council for ultimate approval.
As far as the stormwater goes.
As far as the stormwater goes, no, sir, you would have the authority to approve those.
Okay.
And you would be responsible for confirming that each of those projects meets the qualifications. And I modified that based off some of the council person's comments on not wanting to slow down the process. I understand that this is a need for us to be able to access these funds quickly, and so I heard that, but I think accountability needs to be placed on somewhere, and I think this does that.
So so based on your amendments, then this would be the TDEC infrastructure grant match would fall under the, outside of the contracts, right? Contracts
The
have to come
contract,
back,
yes, sir.
But everything else would fall under the quarterly reports?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, and that was the other component. We talked about some reporting. Quarterly, with this, the council would receive reports outlining, those expenses and the balance of these three proposed categories. So that if we get through this and we say, hey, we did not spend everything within the community support here in the next year or so, we have the opportunity to modify this again and move those monies to somewhere where they can be spent.
Mr. Chairman, what I was essentially asking is, if nothing changes today, would we still not at least attempt to gain access to these TDEC funds for the, Ms. Wolf, I see you nodding your head, perhaps you can clarify, but it seems with or without additional language, we would still pursue the needs that we've approved in the spending plan that came from our approved capital budget. And it would make no sense not to use these TDEC funds. So, I mean, with or without additional language, we would still be attempting to access those funds, correct?
Yeah, correct.
It only makes sense.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Given what has been outlined, and in my opinion, kind of given some clarity to the resolution, freeing up to 10 million based off the new guidelines, giving us the ability to move quickly, we're not slowing that down, given the potential to take advantage of the TDEC money potentially there. And then a big thing that I've heard feedback from the community is community support, people wanting to be involved. And here with that 2.9, given those things and the clarity this provides with the accountability, I would move to accept this amendment to the resolution.
Okay. We didn't already have, we hadn't had a motion yet?
We had- that was-
Okay, all right, I thought we already had one, excuse me. All right, so there's a motion on the floor, is there a second?
I second that.
All right, any further discussion from council that's been done?
Yes, now, based on the things that, additional, the funding that he's talking about, the question still is, we still can do the same thing with the resolution we already have in place. You know, instead of going with this resolution.
That's right. All the capital items that we were presented in the prior plan can be purchased under this amended resolution.
No, he's asking if the unamended resolution that we approved last week, if we can still deploy the funds the same way.
We would have to qualify those funds as they are put into qualified categories presently, or amend the resolution at a later date. So the resolution is going to have to be amended one way or the other.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, on that. Why would the resolution have to be amended one way or the other when we already had the money outlined, how we were going to spend it? All we're going to focus on quickly right now is working on the stormwater plan. I don't see, why do we have to amend?
So at some point, I mean, whether today or the future of the council, we would need to amend it to reflect the lost revenue category if we're going to, if we're going to adopt the standard, the standard 10 million, I think is what it's called.
There would be a budget amendment that supports the spend plan resolution. There will be a needed budget amendment.
Okay.
But that can be, since this will be in a separate fund, right, and the amendment would not increase the total appropriation. That can be done in one reading.
Okay.
If,
So, yeah.
and just to try to contribute a little bit to the conversation, my understanding is that, not to confuse things hopefully, but my understanding is that the final rule is effective April the 1st. However, in the final rule guidance, it kind of authorizes, and that has to do with notifications that the federal government has to comply with and everything, but it offers guidance that says that you can basically, cities can essentially begin to implement the final rule today without any risk.
You can operate under the final rule before
Yeah.
implementation on April
Yeah,
1st.
it's just a lot of legalese in there, but you could make decisions today under the guidance of the final rule and be okay.
So we got a little wiggle room before April the 1st.
Yeah.
Well, it basically said final rule starts now, but, you know,
But April 1st,
officially, we're going to say the
right.
official day. Yeah. All those lawyers.
Right.
But I'm just want to make clear things that, Councilman Taylor's talking about can still be implemented.
Yeah, so
in
the
resolution that we have already in place.
The stormwater piece we'd have to bring that back to council for project-based approval. Once we get to identifying, what we have laid out now, right? So what would fall under the lost revenue category, what would fall under everything, that 2.9 million that Councilman Taylor has laid out. The committee that's been working on this is planning to meet on Thursday to kind of talk about that, to relook at the final guidance on how that fits, right? Because, I mean, it's going to be, I'm going to say difficult, but, it'll be an interesting exercise to see how we fit exactly 10 million in that lost revenue, and then if there's any spillover in an item, what we'd have to justify in that item that spills over beyond the 10 million. So, or if we, how do we get to that even mark? It's even arbitrary number that we have to fall within. So that's what that committee will be working on Thursday.
I think,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so to that point, the committee meeting on Thursday posed a question, would it not be wise to allow the collective committee that's been working on this for approximately 7 months to review what may be appropriate changes based on the recent information?
I think regardless of the vote today, the committee's going to do that.
I think the two main points are, one, this involves the community, which is a running theme through the American Rescue Plan guidance, is to have community be a part of this process and for us to address those that are negatively affected by this. And then secondly, this gives the mayor the authority and reporting guidelines on how we spend these dollars.
All right. Any additional questions, discussion? If not, council, please vote.
Confirming, are you, Johnny? I just want to make sure you're abstaining.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 to, it's 4 to. We have Wallace, no. We have McKelvey, no. We have 1 abstain.
So it passes.
It's 4,
Uh,
4, 3,
It's
1.
four-
I need to vote again.
Yeah, put your,
Yeah, everybody hold your vote, please.
Why is Ron abstaining?
Cisco,
that's,
McKelvey.
yeah, with a 4, 3, 1 vote,
Wallace.
it splits the vote 4-4, so it doesn't pass.
No. Abstain.
Is that correct? I think abstention,
Abstention counts as a.
no vote?
Got to have 5.
Yeah, you gotta have 5.
That's not,
Right
yes,
now.
and that's half. That's not a
That's
majority.
half.
If nobody, if no one voted, everybody abstained, it would pass. If one person voted yes, everybody else would have to pass. I don't think it counts
The-
the non-abstention in the majority, but I think it has to be a majority.
Has to be a majority vote in the affirmative.
Yeah.
That's what I understand.
So just to clarify, did it pass or not?
No, it did not
No,
pass.
it did not
4,
pass.
3, 1.
Is
so the
that-
majority?
Four affirmatives are not getting
It,
Where did that come from?
Praise the Lord, whatever.
I do not think it passed, but only 4 out of 8 voted.
that's, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so the amendment did not pass. Okay. All right. No further business coming before the council. Meeting's adjourned.
Hey, Scott.